I failed before I got a perfect 45 in the IB. Let me explain. So this was my second mathematics test in Math HL AA, and we were going to be talking about combinatorics as well as some proofs. Long story short, I spent all my time studying, or what I thought was studying. I spent all this time working. I spent a few days preparing, and then when the exam date came, I thought I did okay. It was pretty bad. Like I walked out of that being like, damn, this is pretty bad. But I thought I didn't do that bad. Long story short, I got the exam back and I scored a 4 out of 7. That was the lowest I've ever been in any math test in my entire MYP IBDP journey ever. And I remember seeing that and looking at it and I'm like, is this really what I've come to? Am I really going to accept this number 4? Or am I going to unleash my potential? Am I going to take action steps, change the way I'm studying in order to get that perfect 45, which I promised earlier on in that year I would get? When I saw that, I felt this pin in my stomach and I saw myself in that. And I'm like, damn, am I really a level 4 student? Or is there something I can do right now to flip that and get a higher score and ultimately reach my goal of getting a 45? And that's exactly what I did. And then in my next exam on trigonometry, I got a 7. And then after that on my vectors, I got a 7. And then my mock, I got a 7. And then in my derivatives exam, I got a perfect 7, which hopefully you should see on the screen right now. And then with the integrals as well, I got a 7. Finals, I got a 7. Ended up getting a 7 overall and then that perfect 45 score. So the question becomes, how exactly did I do it? Well, these are the 3 things I did. Number 1 was that I improved my study habits. Okay. More specifically, I had this study routine of, and most students make this mistake. All right. I was one of those. I would spend my time doing low value study tasks. Oftentimes this would include just watching some videos quite passively or reading some of the textbook or really doing anything that isn't the most important study priority that you have. All right. And that is very simple. That's doing as many past paper questions as humanly possible. All right. And this is where I had it completely backwards. Okay. I saw these past paper questions. I'm like, okay, I'm going to do a few and then I should be good to go. That is wrong. Most students completely underestimate the volume that is required with past paper questions. Before I went into the math exam, I was doing some past paper questions. Okay. Don't get me wrong. Not like I wasn't doing those. I was doing a few, but if I was to think really how many I was doing before I got into that test, which I then got my number 4 in, I maybe did like 15 or 20 past paper questions. Okay. And the entire span leading up to that exam. On my next exam, I made it this goal that, all right, if I was doing 5 past paper questions a day, now I'm just going to do as much as I humanly can, right? I'm going to do, instead of 5, I'm going to do 500. Now, how do I approach doing 500 instead of 5 if I have the exact same amount of time? And what you got to remember is that one of the biggest difference between successful students and unsuccessful students, it's not necessarily that successful students are somehow doing something different. That's not actually what's happening. The biggest difference between these 2 types of students is that successful students spend more time doing the most valuable tasks, while unsuccessful students may also do those tasks, but instead of spending all their time on the most valuable, they spend the rest of their time on the least valuable task. In other words, the most successful, top achieving 45 student spends little to no time on the tasks that don't matter. So it's not a question of what more do I need to do, but instead a question of what can I do less of so I can have more time on the most important task. And that's exactly how you manage to get 500 past paper questions done, because instead of spending all your time doing a bunch of useless reading the text, none of that matters. Your studying begins the minute you start doing a past paper question. Now, there's a very specific methodology that I learned leading up to that first 7, which is the way by which I approach doing these past paper questions. Okay, instead of just doing questions as you would normally do it as if you were on an exam, I approach doing questions with one objective in mind. And that objective is very simple. It's to identify the stumbling block. It's to identify the filter, the block in the road that is stopping me from successfully solving this question. Okay. And it's up to me to identify what that is and then eliminate that, remove that from achieving that score. So essentially the way that I would go about solving these questions is that every single time I sat down to do it, I would ask myself, why can I not get this right? What is stopping me? Why? What is the aha moment, right? That click, that the thing you finally realize that you need to know to solve the question. What is that in this question and what is stopping me from ultimately getting that final result? And then when you approach questions from this angle of trying to identify what that is, get to that as fast as possible, ignore 80% of everything else that doesn't matter, only focus on this 20%, only focus on the most valuable components. That's when you can plow through hundreds of past paper questions in multiple hours. And then this turned into my study routine. Instead of spending all the time reading the textbook, I would just do as many past paper questions possible. And the crazy part about this is that I only spend really 3 to 4 hours every single day studying. All that time was on past paper questions. Very little was on understanding the content except for the pre-study session reviews that I did, 15 minutes. But apart from that, it was just 3 hours, 4 hours of just focus in a state of flow, right? Productive flow, working on doing as many past paper questions as possible. Typically, I'd put on some EDM music as well so I could reach that state of flow faster and eliminate distractions. And it also made the entire thing much more fun. That's what I recommend. And then number 2 thing that I did was to build discipline with doing those questions as possible. You need to understand that it's not enough to just do it one day, right? To just do 500 past paper questions in one day. Will that help? Absolutely. Much more helpful than just doing nothing, and you might see a result as soon as possible. But in order for you to really achieve that level 7 in all of your subjects, you need to be doing this as consistently as you possibly can. All right. The IB is a marathon, not a sprint. It doesn't matter how much work you do the week leading up to the exam. All of that has a marginal impact on your final score, if any. What matters is all the hours of reps you put in leading up to that final decision, leading up to that final exam. And what you need to understand with all of this is I want you to treat it as a game. Your objective is to get as many past paper questions done as humanly possible. And then what I want you to do is, I use this stopwatch all the time, but I track the amount of time that I spent working on this. And then every single day I try to improve, beat that number, get more past paper questions done, maybe compete against a friend. Or something else I did actually was that I have these big calendar blocks on my wall right over there. And every single time I complete my daily habit, I get this huge X and then write it on top of the calendar. It is so incredibly satisfying to see progress being made. And actually research shows that this is what makes you happy, right? When you see actual progress towards your goals. So ultimately, once you know that you got to do past paper questions, how can you make that a discipline in your own life and do it consistently nonstop? What I strongly recommend if you want some help with this is to join our Grizzly Elite Discord community down below. Essentially, in this community, we have tons of games like this where you compete against other students, prizes, rewards, one-on-one sessions, Q&As with Ivy League students, additional content that we don't release on this channel. All of that can be found in the link down below. So go ahead, join the Grizzly Elite Discord community and get all of those benefits. It's an insane value proposition. The only issue with this is that we don't accept everybody, okay? So there's an entire application process that you need to go through simply because for the people who get in, I want to make sure that they're surrounded by a community of high achieving students, right? Not just some random Joe, not someone random who's not focused at all. I want the best of the best individuals who are truly willing to take obsessive action to improve themselves. If you show signs of that, if through the application process, we're going to accept you and you'll have access to that community. So join it down below. And then the third thing I did, which got me from what I consider to be a failure to getting that perfect level 7, was that I scheduled what I like to call a game over time, which basically means that by 6 to 6:30 p.m. in the evening, the game was over. All right, I could no longer study. I could no longer do any more work towards my academic goals. Okay, it was done at that period of time. And essentially what this allowed me to do was it allowed me to otherwise compress the work into a short period of time, right? If you know Parkinson's law, you know that our brains will allocate the amount of time we need to work on a certain task in a certain period of time without adding any more. So that's exactly what I trained myself to do. By adding a game over time, I knew that after a certain period of time, I can no longer do work. And then what I did from 6:30 until the time I went to bed, which was like 9:30, 10, was I spent that time doing whatever I want. Typically that was just working on some side projects simply because I just genuinely love making progress on my goals, right? Doing work and the rest of it. So I'd spend the majority of my time doing that. Otherwise, I would spend that with friends, with family, taking out my dog, whatever I wanted to do at any period of time. It gave me that freedom to know that eventually I would have that amount of time in the evening that I can allocate towards myself. And this is really what IB students struggle with. All right. There's really two parts to this. The first of which is they procrastinate until the last minute. Not a good idea. And by the way, you can actually leverage this procrastination tendency by doing what I like to call bomb time. So you can actually see that in one of the videos I made. Hopefully the eye right here should be on procrastination video. So I made a video on procrastination. If you want to utilize that superpower of procrastination, but not actually procrastinate, but you can utilize that in other parts of your day, check that video out. That's number one. And then the second thing I see IB students struggle with is they have this preconceived notion that they need to be working every single second of the day, or else there's something wrong with them, or else they're missing out, or else they're going to lose at the game of university admissions. Now, having been on the other side, I can tell you that that is not true. And the thing is, working 24/7, working nonstop, is it effective in the short term? Absolutely. But when it comes to long-term success, meaning getting you into those top universities, which again, just a reminder, that takes 4 years. That's not a short amount of time. For most high school students, it's a long period of time. In order for you to win at that, you need to ask yourself, how can I do what I'm doing today every single day so that I have the same focus, the same energy, I can get the same results consistently? Because that is the only thing that I'll be able to do every single day leading up to the university admission and then the final exam. This is oftentimes why working long hours is just not a good idea, typically, because most students can't sustain that for a long period of time. And then they're going to crash and they're going to burn out, which I don't like. And by the way, there's a way around burnout, but most students don't really understand how to leverage that. So they crash, they burn, they have all these different issues. Their entire life feels like a circus. And the second thing I learned very recently, actually, is that the thing that we think is the best might not actually be the easiest to implement. If I give you a better solution to do something, or a better routine, or some complicated system, it might be the best as in it delivers the most results, but it's not necessarily the simplest to implement. And what I found is that when we implement simple habits that may not be the most optimal, but they are simple to do, we can then continue to do those every single day or the entire 4 years that we're in high school. And even though they might not be the most optimal, we can do them consistently anyways. This is oftentimes why I see students who come to me with very complicated habit plans and they want to implement all these different goals in their life, which is great. Like that's amazing. However, it's very difficult to make sure that you implement those consistently for the rest of your life. So one of the easiest things I like to do is just start very simple and then build those habits from there. And that's all to say that in order for you to really make sure that you have the ability to focus, schedule a game overtime, take proper rest and recoveries, and then build those habits simply before scaling them up. If you found this video helpful, if you have any questions, need any support, any one-on-one training, access to a bunch of resources, please do so by accessing the Grizzly Community Discord. So go ahead and fill out the application with the link down below. You need to have gotten at least a level 7 in the last month. If you haven't done so already, please implement these strategies, get that level 7, and then apply. Long story short, if you have any questions at all, want additional training, want gamify school, receive a bunch of interesting rewards, talk to other students who are also high achieving students, which is why we have the application process to begin with, so we can limit the amount of students in that Discord channel, apply down below, let me know there, and I'm more than happy to. All right, I don't answer to my email anymore, no more Instagram, none of that type of stuff. All my questions are on the Discord community channel, so please do so over there. Thanks so much for watching, everybody, and until next time, stay grizzly. I'll see you in the next episode. Have a good day, everybody. Goodbye.